founder and principal consultant of Engage Identity, which is an identity and access management consulting firm in Seattle that I started about 2 years ago. It's called Engage Identity because I have an unhealthy obsession with Captain Picard. My Twitter handle is up here, so feel free to tweet me questions. I'll check that at the end. In my career as a consultant in the identity field, I worked with a lot of different kinds of identity teams. I've gotten an idea of what works, what doesn't, and why some teams are phenomenal and why some teams are just okay. Whether you're an identity team leader, sponsor, or an identity practitioner on the front line, I've gathered actionable advice from my clients and colleagues to make your team more effective, cohesive, and impactful. So we're gonna go over 6 critical components today. The first is diversity. Then we'll go over hiring and training, roles and skill sets, strategy and team building, and then where identity teams fall in the org chart generally, and executive support. So the first thing I want to talk about, not because it's the most important, but because it's the lowest hanging fruit. The biggest opportunity we have for the least amount of investment, that's diversity. While I've seen identity teams do good work without being diverse, I've never seen them do great work. Diversity is a crucial component of high-performing identity teams. Identity, as you know, is a field of information security, and information security is a cat and mouse game. So we need to be more creative than the people who are trying to attack our systems. It's incredibly difficult to be creative as a team when we all have the same background and the same experiences. Racial diversity is a particularly difficult problem for us to solve. For a long time, I thought it was a pipeline problem. We weren't graduating enough minority students with marketable tech skills. We weren't giving them the right educational opportunities. And it turns out that while opportunities for minorities are an issue, hiring is actually a bigger issue. So if we had a pipeline problem, there wouldn't be any minority applicants out there to hire. If we had a pipeline problem, the ratio of minority computer science majors and minority tech hires would be 1-to-1, and it's not. Guess how many Black and Latino computer science majors land jobs in the tech industry? 50%. 50%. Here's the graph. This is from USA Today. So if you look at the bottom there, that's the number of hires versus the number of graduates. So we're leaving a huge amount of new knowledge, diverse experiences, and different backgrounds on the table. These are the people we need to help us think about identity in new and different ways and to help us take our work to the next level. Hiring for diversity is really challenging because we all have inherent biases that can be incredibly difficult to work around. The first step is acknowledging that fact. We are not colorblind, we are not gender blind, we are not disability blind. The most actionable step you can take today to account for that is to take the names off of the resumes. Take them off. Everyone who is raised in Western culture will interpret a resume from John Smith differently from a resume from Aziz Ansari. Take off the names, and and if you have time, take out the gendered references as well. This will help you be more objective about who actually has the talent and experience you're looking for. So once you find the right resumes, you have to bring them in for an interview. Setting diversity aside for the moment, how do you sort the candidates who are smart and will stick around from the candidates who you regret hiring a few months down the road? The biggest hiring mistake I see is hiring committees who sit down with a candidate, ask a series of verbal questions, and make a decision. No, unless you're selecting for acting ability, that process will tell you next to nothing about how that person will perform on your team. Here are some alternatives. Whiteboard things. Come up with a good, tough problem and have the candidate work with your team to solve it on a whiteboard. Let's say someone just released a 0-day exploit for your single sign-on system. What information does the candidate ask for? Where would they try to find it? What mitigation steps would they consider? Have them research things. Give them a topic. Let's say we're considering rolling out YubiKeys. Give me your opinion. Give them 10 minutes to do research and write an email on their thoughts. This is way more common occurrence in everyday work than verbal questions. Can they do research quickly? Can they organize their thoughts? Can they convey them in an organized written fashion appropriate for readers with different levels of technical knowledge? A question I commonly get asked and that I deal with myself is whether to hire people with experience or new hires. Now, obviously, if you're building a team from scratch, absolutely start with experience. I know it's expensive, but it's worth it. I've found that 1-to-1 is a good ratio of experience to young talent. You want the new perspectives that people without experience in the industry bring, but you also want people who can teach them the field. The best way to train new people, especially in identity, is to hire in pairs or in groups. And it's expensive, but it's very intimidating to take a new job in a new field that you've never learned. And it helps a lot for them to have someone who's in the same boat where they're being onboarded together. That way they can ask stupid questions of each other and figure things out, which helps them learn, and they're not bothering your expert team members and costing you money. So that brings me to my next topic, which is always be teaching. So raise your hand in this room if you learned identity and access management in school. Just for the video, that's no one. So this is a field that, at least for now, everyone learns on the job. And the field changes really fast. You have to have ongoing training and continuing education opportunities for your team. Having the experts literally assign homework to the new folks. Quiz them on terminology. Assign them sections of the NIST digital identity guidelines and have them report back to the team on what they researched. Yes, new people can learn by doing, but they'll learn a lot faster if your team takes the initiative to teach them. Okay, so you have the right people. What skills do you need? I have found that a ratio of 1-to-5 on PM to dev is a good ratio for identity teams. That's super low. Most software PMs can easily manage projects for 9 or 10 or even 30 developers at a time. But identity is different, and I'll tell you why. All products are dependent on identity products. That means that when we want to make changes, we need a lot of cover. Running interference is a major job in identity. Merely getting the time and space and permission to change company infrastructure on the identity level is a huge job. Additionally, timelines are critical in identity. Unlike normal features or bug fixes, changes in identity will propagate to every dependent application. That means simultaneous version releases. That means absolute timelines. That means PMs who can rewrite the project plan in one night and take no prisoners. Additionally, everyone needs an architect. It's the architect's job to be familiar with current and emerging standards. The architect uses that knowledge to guide the evolution of the identity infrastructure across the organization, to apply best practices and leverage common resources so that the infrastructure doesn't get out of date, insecure, or inefficient. So you've hired identity experts, you've hired identity youngsters. At what point do you hire a usability expert? I would say always have one on contract. If you can't afford one, look for students. It's great for student interns in usability to get technical experience on their resume and get hands-on experience user testing wireframes and interfaces that your team builds out. Obviously, once your contract usability person is coming in regular basis, it makes sense to bring them on full time. In my experience, this happens once an identity team gets to about 10 people. So you have a great identity team with a diversity of experience and talent and usability resources. Where in the org chart do you put them? Are we information security? Yes. We could go in the CISO office. Are we development infrastructure? Absolutely. We could go on a separate team within the development infrastructure. Are we client relations? We do build fundamental relationship infrastructure. That's part of our job. So we're also kind of marketing. And there are absolutely some organizations who have skinned this cat by saying, look, if you don't fit anywhere, then we'll put you everywhere. Those organizations embed their identity people into every team separately. I've seen that work extremely well. It's much easier to have consistent identity across your applications if identity people are there for the design and development stages. Other identity teams are centralized. That works really well too. It's easier to train, develop expertise, and shift workloads if you're all on one team. There's a lot of disagreement on this topic, and we as a field, I don't think, have found a best practice here yet, so I'm still getting feedback on. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about where in the org chart identity should go. Another big topic is strategy. I work with a lot of identity teams on how to implement a team strategy. It's not easy. Sometimes I feel like a therapist. You have to start with assessing your entire identity infrastructure and user lifecycle for all of the people and things that have accounts in your system, then slowly chip away at reducing friction in those processes and increasing their security. How do we know if we're doing a good job? If we're moving the needle in the right direction? Metrics for identity teams can be tricky. If we're doing our jobs well, people shouldn't notice or have to think about identity very much. So support tickets are an obvious metric. If people are having to contact tech support to make their identity work, that means we're not doing our jobs. Another great metric is a count of how many of your identity systems aren't standards compliant. Standards are designed to make your organization interoperable and secure. Are you using systems and vendors that implement those standards correctly? The next thing I want to talk about is team building. We have an interesting challenge in identity and in America about team building because we're very alcohol-centric. We like our happy hours and our receptions, and a lot of non-Americans find that very strange, and they feel very alienated that all of the networking we do involves alcohol. So I'm always looking for ways to do team building that are new and interesting and creative. One of the best ones I found is escape rooms. So an escape room is where you pay and you go to a location and you get quote unquote locked in a room, but not actually locked. They let you leave if you have to leave for any reason. And there are a bunch of puzzles for you to solve. And eventually those puzzles will lead to a key that will get you out of the room. And this is perfect for identity teams. Identity teams have to communicate really well, and we have to be really creative at solving problems. So it's a wonderful way for you to take your team, do something that doesn't involve alcohol, although it could involve alcohol afterwards, especially if you get out. And ideally you get out within an hour and then you go and celebrate. So I really like that strategy for team building. There's one universal commonality of all successful identity teams. That commonality is executive support. It's absolutely essential that identity projects take priority in the organization. We are frequently the team that reduces friction in user experiences and increases overall security, but we also have a million legacy dependencies. All of the applications in our organization rely on the identity layer every day. In order for that layer to change, everything on top of it has to change as well. So without executive support to delay other projects, to force other teams to change the way that they work, to rewrite business critical applications, the best identity people in the world will get nothing done. So in conclusion, identity is a field that we all have to learn on the job. So our team activities need to be different. We have much more complicated hiring and onboarding processes than other technology fields. There are 4 things that make good identity team into a rockstar identity team. Those things are diversity, creativity, constant learning, and executive support. I hope that I've given you some insight into how to achieve those. Thank you for your time, and we have plenty of time for questions. Anyone have questions? Yes. Here, let me get you a mic. Hello? Is this mic on? Now? Should I try the other one? Oh, there it goes. Well, it's for the video.
All right, Sarah, as a male in the field of identity, I'm not a minority, obviously, but I have the privilege of working with very talented women and minorities where I do work, and I was wondering if there's a way that I could do a better job, or us men could do a better job of influencing women or younger women to go into our field, and what kind of advice do you think that we should be giving, to younger women who may see it as a challenge to break into the field? How can we be a better job to accommodate that?
That's a great question. I have been fortunate to have really great allies in the information security field. I think one of the best things that they do that has helped me since I was very early in my career is that when we have meetings and I make a point, they will repeat that point with my name attached to it. And rather than making it their own idea or talking over it, they will point out, look, this was a good idea, this person said it, so that it doesn't kind of get rolled over, so that I don't become invisible. That's really helpful. I find that as far as information security and finding young women, B-sides conferences tend to have a lot of people bringing daughters to them these days, which is super fun. So I try and speak at those. I would suggest other people speak at those. There's Geek Girl Con in Seattle. I don't know if there are other things like that. And we talk about some information security stuff there. But getting people into identity is hard because most people don't even know what it is. You can plug ID Pro here. So ID Pro is a professional organization for identity professionals that's launched this morning, and part of what we want to do is figure out how to cultivate more talent in the identity field and explain it and get more diversity. So helping out with that effort would certainly be helpful.
So we're having a hard time recruiting in general. Nothing, with diversity. Minorities just don't even apply, right? We don't even get them on the list for whatever reason. But in general, we don't get qualified candidates because identity is not the sexy part of security.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to do pen testing. So even after, if they get sucked into the interview, you get done, they say, I'm looking for a pen testing job.
Oh.
I want to hack something, and we're like, oh, that's not what we do. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge recruiting security people, and we've actually tried to look outside of security for those type of people that might be good in identity.
That's what I hear from a lot of identity teams, is that you just have to find smart people and train them up, right? You know identity, you already have expertise in it. They don't need to know that. You have that. But they do need to be smart. They need to be able to learn. And I'm sure you can find undergrads out there, computer science majors and other majors, informatics, who would be interested in learning a new field, especially a field that I feel like is as exciting as this one.
I do too.
Yeah.
Most security people, especially out of college, want to hack something.
Right. Yep, makes sense.
Kind of related to your comment about diversity, we found that finding people with strong skills in other infrastructure areas like database or app development, networking, make real good additions to identity teams because they can bridge the relationships with the other teams in the organizations that you have to work with to make the program successful. Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Recruiting from other teams, cross-training with other teams is also really helpful. If you can teach them a little bit of identity and they can teach you a little bit of networking, right? Everybody wins.
Because what we found is that the identity stuff isn't all that hard to teach. It's all the layers of other things that it sits on top of or interacts with and things like that really is a struggle for people.
Yeah.
We've done exactly that. We've gone into other teams and kind of pulled people into identity after we talked about what it is. So our identity team is built from some folks we pulled from the development team, some infrastructure folks. We didn't actually go out and try to find them out in the world. We cultivated them from within. From some other teams, and it's worked very, very well because then they can bridge the communication gap to go talk to a developer on their level or an infrastructure person.
Absolutely. Making new identity people. Make CIS bigger.
Hi. I have a question, but can I just make a comment about diversity in IT real quick?
Of course.
Because I also hire people. I'm a PM for identity. Sorry, a little nervous. We're doing, right now I'm a PM for rolling out identity project, a platform for organization.
Mm-hmm.
So we hire people, and I think that one thing to keep in mind is every organization has a organizational culture, and I find that in IT there's a certain culture for developers. I'm talking more about full-time staff that are that come up in the United States. There is a culture around IT, and it's built around a certain demographic. So when we think about diversity, don't just think about hiring people that look different but come from the same culture, because that fit might be hard to find. Think about real diversity. And it's hard because you want a good team fit, you want a good organizational fit, but also think about how inviting you are, how open you are to somebody that comes from a slightly different cultural background, one that led them to IT from a different path from you.
Yeah, they don't have to have a great Slack GIF game just to get hired.
Yeah. Or they weren't hardcore gamers in high school who eventually turn that into development, and they go home and they just game. And this is a certain subculture in IT too, but everybody in IT is not from that culture, you know. So anyway, a question I had was about where these teams would be located in the organization. We've struggled with this. We've also struggled with executive sponsorship. So we are part of an application platform, which is diverse in the technology that we use on the platform. And the thing that we have in common, the only thing is reusable software. So we really support downstream teams. That's how we see it. Problem with that is we have a lot of stakeholders. So we have sales, marketing, all these people, especially you talk about login pages and things like this. And we've had problems because none of the business all wants input, but they see us as a they see us as a sink for the company as far as cost. Right. And nobody wants to really touch the project, but everybody wants to kind of put their 2 cents into it. So how have you dealt with this organization trying to get buy-in from the business that this is important, this actually could provide real business value?
Talking a lot and selling the usability side of identity certainly helps with that. We can improve usability quite a bit. We can improve speed quite a bit. And also talking about the risks of breaches. We'll get you into the ears of the board pretty quickly when they start hearing how much that costs if we have an identity breach. That can be a way to get that executive support to kind of sell it, but it is really hard being stuck between the stakeholders and the downstream people, and all identity teams deal with that.
So with regard to where the IAM team sits, I'm sure there's no one size fits all, right? There's no panacea. I've seen it work both in tech ops as well as under information security, but there's not as much clout from tech ops. Yeah. So my thought is it's probably better fit with security, right?
Good. That's good to hear. Yeah.
Right. So
you feel like a CISO office would have more leeway to do projects and get things done. Yeah.
Right. And the interesting thing about the CISO office anymore is it's not just penetration testing and getting your vulnerabilities.
Right.
It's DevSecOps. It's getting your application security, getting security in the SDLC. So one thing that I work for Staples, and we've come across is when you talk to an application team and you talk to leaders, and you say, okay, you can build your application and don't worry about the performance. When you're ready to get to production, that'll be the problem of the performance testing team. You can't do that, right? You have to go back to scratch at that point. And that's the analogy we've been giving for security.
Right.
We're like, you can't just build your entire application, go right to almost to production, and then you want security to just checkbox sign off. And then it's our problem to fix your code or things like that. So
so she mentioned DevSecOps. If you guys haven't looked at that, it's a great initiative that basically says exactly this, that security needs to happen throughout the design and development process as part of DevOps, not just as an add-on from a separate team.
So it wasn't a question, just a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? All right, thanks everybody.